when I run. Sometimes I run to exhaust myself too much and I feel physically pains too much, but it takes away the pain I felt and do feel over the long-term mental health problems I've had, and really the medication didn't help. It takes away all the frustration, a lot of the anger that's in me built up over the years, still there in my head. 20 years in the hospital, all the medication did would just block everything. I didn't feel those things. I just felt dead. I remember some of the runners at the running club, until I started going there and telling them a lot about my background. They told me that we don't believe what goes on behind closed doors. My whole life were controlled, really. I didn't know that I couldn't leave the hospital even though I were on a section, because I didn't know what a section was. I was frightened to death. I didn't really know what was happening to me. I went in as a chronic alcoholic, and then 7 months after, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I did have problems try to express how I was feeling. The doctor prescribed me chlorpromazine, which is an antipsychotic drug. I didn't know what it was at the time, but it was a friend who told me what it was, because he was a schizophrenic, and he says he'd had it in prison, and he says it was the worst drug anybody would want to take. Even the drug users would refuse it, and they usually would take any drug. I was on Largactil, I was on Emrin for a short time. I knew Emrin made me feel better because it made me feel drunk. And he put me on a small injection with a depot. I think it was the Pixel. I experienced these horrible side effects of these drugs that was giving me. I used to feel sick. I used to get horrible cramps when I had to go to bed. On the ward, I used to go to bed about 7 o'clock because I just had no energy. Straight after my visits, after my mum had gone or my dad, I'd go to bed, but I did hallucinate and I knew I couldn't sleep. I just couldn't cope, couldn't deal with it. I thought the way I could get any help was to smash the windows on the ward with my wrists or my hands. I'd nearly bled to death because I nearly cut an artery in my arm. There were a charge nurse told me, "Why didn't you do this tomorrow when it was my day off? Why did you do it today at 7:30 in the morning?" And then there were another nurse says to me, "Is it hurting?" I says, "It is a bit." And he responds, "Well, I hope it kills you." It's for me to pull myself together. But how can you pull yourself together when you don't know what you're doing? You've nearly bled to death. You've been diagnosed a paranoid schizophrenic when you went in for drinking, and then you're told that you're going to be on medication for the rest of your life. And all I wanted to do was get a flat, leave my parents, and look after myself.
How did Chris come into your life?
Yeah, just working in the community mental health team. He was quite angry with psychiatry and with carers who were working with him or support workers who were working with him. He just felt like he wasn't treated as an equal. And at first, all I did was just listen to him. It was a hard listen because he's frustrated and was used to people not listening to him, and very cynical. And I guess that cynicism was understandable because he just hadn't been listened to and taken seriously about his concerns about side effects but also maybe about his potential or his strengths. Not having a say about what you're prescribed is very common, and not being informed about the possible long-term adverse effects, negative effects of medication when you're prescribed it is very common. But yeah, just not being collaborated with, being done to, whether that's being prescribed or not being prescribed, people feel like they're not given enough information, enough choice and support in decision making. So it's very, the old approach is doctor knows best, and that's still very strong. I know of an 18-year-old who's just been prescribed antipsychotic medication, neuroleptic medication. She's not had any experiences of psychosis, but and I don't think she's been given any information about what the potential side effects are. And she is now feeling really numb and feeling really indifferent and detached from her emotions and doesn't know why.
I'd been on chlorpromazine for about 2.5 years, and when I discharged myself, I went up to see doctor as an outpatient, and he said, we start withdrawing your, cutting your Largactil down and put you on Modicate. Plus at that time I started antidepressant tablets as well, and tablets for side effects for the medication. By 6 months, he decided to take me off the rest of my chlorpromazine and increase the Modicate to, I believe it was 100 milligrams a fortnight. I said, would there be any side effects or withdrawals off the chlorpromazine? And he says, no, you'd be okay. But that wasn't true. I was vomiting, I was getting sweats, I couldn't sleep again. I asked doctor about the section, and he says he wouldn't renew the section because I'd been responding to treatment, but he wanted me to go back up to Linfield Mount and go into self-care. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get a life. I didn't want to spend my life in hospital. I'd seen a lot of the older people being in hospital for years and on medication, and their normality wasn't right. It wasn't my normality. I wanted to be a human being. I lived at the supported housing, believe it or not, for 22 years. For the first few years I liked it because I did have my independence, so I was buying my own food, I had my own money, I had my own room, but the staff wasn't very understanding. They were very interfering. You had to do what they wanted to do, join in their activities. I asked a number of occasions when I was still in hospital, before I came off my section and while I was discharged, whether I could come off my medication in Modicate. And the doctor says, well, it wouldn't be a good idea, Chris, because before you was on the medicine, you became very unstable. You started having hallucinations and voices, and you tried to harm yourself. So I just had to take his word. Not that it didn't make any difference me asking him or telling him I wanted to come off it, because his word was the final.
The kind of attitude Chris was facing was, and one of the main doctors that Chris struggled with to be heard, her approach was, you've got to think backwards from the inquiry. So that's still very much guiding services as well. You've got to think, so what's the worst case scenario? So if somebody says they want to reduce their medication, if you think, what's the worst case scenario? That's how a lot of mental health professionals think. And we shouldn't blame them. We see them, they're victims as well of the coroner's court. So we really need to change the whole system in our society. So the coroners will throw the book at mental health professionals if they've helped somebody reduce their medication and then that person's killed themselves. So that's not seen. Whereas if somebody's medicated to the hilt and they kill themselves, the professional's probably much more covered.
That risk averse.
Yeah, risk averse, but also a blaming approach to understanding suicides or terrible tragedies, rather than a compassionate approach to understanding tragedy. So that creates so much fear. Nobody wants to be blamed, and then they get really defensive. So we need to educate coroners and managers who do investigations. We have to move. So I have hope that we're slowly becoming a more compassionate society, but these institutions, the legal system is very judgmental. A lot of the doctors are also traumatized, and that's why they're acting defensively. So rather than being angry, they're being controlling and not listening.
You use all your faculties, all your simple things you could do when you were younger, when you're learning things. It's so hard to do little things like just go to the shop and buy things. You can't focus to do them, you can't think straight. You can have a conversation, but you can't often do the things you're going to say because you can't put them together. It takes you so long. And then you tell doctors that people are laughing at you or making fun of you, and people looking at you, people talking about you. Well, they use words like paranoid. That were another word wasn't new to me. I mean, I'd heard it a lot when I went into hospital, but not before. And why were I paranoid schizophrenic? I was so depressed. I didn't want to live at home. I didn't want to live at the supported housing. And I had my first drink after 5 years. I drank, I think it was about a bottle of whiskey. We were at somebody's house who I knew it was a reason to get drunk. Not because I wanted to, because I felt so depressed. And I ended up in the BRI. So then doctor decided to reduce the modica to every 3 weeks instead of every 2 weeks. And that did make me less depressed. Over the 30 years I was taking medication, I was told to take medication. I was taken in and out of hospital against my will, or you go in volunteering and you find out you can't leave. I at least took 4 overdoses, but the last overdose I took was life-threatening. I was in a coma. I thought, I'm 40-year-old now. I've not got anywhere. They've not let me come off medication. They've never told me about these side effects. They've never addressed my pains in my legs. They gave me painkillers. I'd gone to see a pain specialist. I'd gone to see a neurologist about the pains. And I'd never got any answers from the doctors. On a couple of occasions I would ask the staff why they don't speak up for me. And they says it's unprofessional for them to disagree with a consultant. Well, I thought, well, why are they there in the first place if they're not going to speak up for me? So the only person I met over the years who were high enough to hold some response on my behalf was Rufus Makers, who was a clinical psychologist. He was much higher up than the staff and the CPN and the support worker I had.
When I supported Chris in his complaint was about his major complaint was about long-term neuroleptic medication causing him irreversible side effects, and he wanted some compensation, and he made the complaint to the trust about this, and I wrote a supportive letter, and I got in trouble for that.
Really?
Yeah, I had to meet with my manager, and they were like, you should have come to the complaints department before you wrote anything. So, and I was like, well, I'm supporting him in his therapeutic journey, and this seems like a really important thing for him to have a voice about what's happened. So agree to disagree, but yeah. So when you do speak up, you are putting yourself in a difficult position.
The main thing I would like to point out on looking back regarding the professionals who give me the medication, I was never told or warned about any long-term or permanent side effects regarding the antipsychotic drugs, the nerve damage, the insomnia. As far as I know now, the guidelines have been changed, but me personally, what have they put in place to treat me for my insomnia and my aphasiasia? There's no they can give me. I've been and had my sleep at a sleep hospital. I had it assessed. They know they can't treat me for my insomnia because it's been caused by antipsychotic drugs. Why do they give out medication or control people with medication against, in my opinion, personal opinion, is that I never had any choice about taking it. Now I've found out the side effects I've got from the antipsychotic drugs are irreversible. Sometimes it'll take me at least 3 days to do a full washing up, because I can only do little bits at a time without breaking things or having no concentration. When I came off the last dosage, somebody might not believe this, but maybe somebody who takes LSD might know, but I didn't sleep at all for at least 5 days when I stopped the last dosage of antipsychotic drugs. All my ex-partner put up with me. They don't want a section, they want a medal. Sometimes it affects my physical, or it affects my blood pressure, which I can't do all about. When I don't sleep, it affects my mood, it affects me eating. It upsets me because I can't do the things I like to do. After 10 years of not being on any antipsychotic drugs, I'm more alert, I can do more things. I started running. The running club I've been with now, I've been with for 6 years. And all the people I've met now, the people I know well, have met me since I've been off medication, antipsychotic drugs. And I can't believe really the response I get from everyday people who I don't know, or people who's got to know me from, the last 10 years, how I'm treated and how they want to talk to me and don't want to cross the road to avoid me like I was when I was drinking or when I was taking medication. Not because I was, when I was taking medication I was violent. I just looked so unapproachable, maybe a little bit different, I would say. But now I've met good friends. The friends at the running club treat me as a runner and as a person.
Yeah, I met Chris 11 years ago. I ran for a small running club. It was 12 members for Queensbury. And this one evening on a Thursday night, Chris coming on his own. He was full of tattoos and he was just not your average, what you say, average runner looks like. And Chris sat down and we all introduced ourselves. Chris was very quiet and he was obviously very shy. And then when he did talk, he slurred his words. But anyway, we got changed, went for a run. And then on the first night, he stopped. He was at the back of the group. He stopped and we carried on. And the plan is whoever's last catches us up. So on this night, Chris went to tie his shoelaces and we carried on. And straight away he got lost. It was over an hour. When we got back to the clubhouse, it was an hour late. As the weeks progressed, we found out that he couldn't tie his shoelaces. He didn't have that coordination. We know his strengths and his weaknesses. His weaknesses are is no sense of direction. So we've done quite a few races now, especially the marathons. And Chris, on one occasion, he came last in the race because he got lost up on the moors. Chris is usually in the top quarter of the runners, 1/4%. He's extremely good. And we were all waiting at the finish line for him because we wouldn't go home until he got back. And we waited and eventually he popped up. And he must have done another marathon. He must have done 2 marathons that day. But yeah, any races, we've got to keep an eye on him because he does get lost. As the weeks and months progressed, he slowly came out of his shell and got talking to us, and we obviously found out that he'd had issues in the past, and he slowly told us what his problems were, and we sort of all took to him. And Chris being Chris, he's a character in himself, and he's a lovely lad.
Sometimes I didn't think anybody'd like me because when you're not well and you look different and you're sedated, people don't notice you. But when I started running and being myself and able to make friends and conversation with people I've never met before, it just built up my confidence. My life, to a certain extent, has improved like 90%. On occasions where I go out and meet my friends at the running club, my friends who I see in town, I'm just treated like a person. They don't talk down to you, or like your 6-year-old, like doctors do when you're in hospital. I've been emotionally damaged. I've been damaged by things I've seen and things that I shouldn't have seen and things I've had to go through. I find it hard to have any physical emotions. The way I deal with emotions is through anger, giving myself a hard time.
I strongly feel that Chris's story isn't the kind of story that gets listened to. You won't find Chris's story even in The Guardian. You know, we put the wrong people on pedestals too much, and our society is much more hierarchical than we recognise. Elitist, and so that's why it's really important. Chris's story is a hidden story, that we listen to it and we get over our own prejudice that's in us all. It's in me. You know, I used to sometimes think, oh God, do I need to listen to Chris again? You know, but actually I do. You know, it's really important. When we do that, it's better. It's good for them, it's good for Chris, it's good for all of us.
I feel given the chance to do something I can do and not what I told I couldn't do has kept me going. Even sometimes I can't do anything. So much I've lost over the years, and I know I'm not going to get it back. And now that I'm 60 this year, I feel it was taken away from me. And all due to, I believe, I just won't listen to. I believed in myself that one day I would get back to me, to being Chris, but it took many, many years. But thank you. Is that okay, love? Yeah. I can do something better than getting lost.